this pre-designed study, basically we're defining how big the bread box is. No design is started. No design will be done as part of this pre-designed study. Design is another phase. So there's months of involvement, questions, and feedback during the design process that the county hasn't made the decision to move forward with the design process yet. So we're in that pre-design phase. So all of the answers will not be defined or answered through the study. We're defining kind of the big, the overall, overarching framework for moving forward to the next step.
Yeah, the way I see this phase, at least from my behalf on the administrative point, this is almost a reinitiation of the beginning. The other piece that, not that Joe potentially left out, is we hired Eric to revalidate all the information we've done previously to being here. We did a previous study, even prior to this one. So we're looking at that one and validating the information we have collected over decades now. Commissioner Player, I think that's about right. It's been a long time, and so this is just the reinitiation of that, beginning that process, and look at what we've done in the past, and we'll pluck out what we can that we feel still applicable in today's situation or the economy or whatever you will call it. And so moving forward, what you've indicated is exactly what's always on all our minds. We got to make sure everyone's included working for what's not going to be a good one.
But my fear in this is that there's already been sites that could have been possibilities, or designs that could have been possible, that now there's real opposition to because those focus groups did not happen prior to this. And realistically, this environment, I mean, for the most part, those of us who are here are people who either are being paid, can count this as your work hours. I mean, you heard the judge. She's got a docket. She can't take off her time. Most of that. I know there was someone here yesterday who had to take vacation time to be here. I mean, this isn't a good public forum.
Okay, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I have to leave soon, and I just wanted to speak about what I've seen, just go over things that I think are important in terms of the work we're doing on the health impact assessment. The one issue with visitation has been kind of glossed over a lot, but it's more of a policy issue, but it does impact design because how the jail is designed is going to be has to do with the policies that are in place. And we were told that there's a policy that children under 6 aren't able to visit their parents. And since I've talked to people about that, it seems that that policy is not enforced, that people do go to the jail and talk, to their parents that are under 6. So I would say having a policy that can't or isn't going to be enforced isn't such a great idea. But I don't understand why the idea of having children in the jail, maybe in the current jail, that's not feasible because of the structure and the limitations that are involved in that. But one of the good things about being able to build a new jail is that the structure should allow for that. And it's actually a law in many states that a woman who gives birth or is breastfeeding, has recently given birth, can bring her child with her to the correctional facility. They have on-site nurseries. These things have all been researched and found to be adequate in terms of child development. So I think that our thinking around those things has to really be examined if this is a good time to do that, because it's going to impact the design. And removing a child from their parent at a very young age can have extreme psychological consequences that can be lifelong. So if we're talking about reducing the need for detention of children and reducing the intergenerational effects of incarceration, that's a really important thing to look at. I also wanted to talk about, I had asked about methadone and the treatment of people who are being detoxed in the jail. And I think that you said there was going to be points to
No, we talked about there's 22 non-rated beds. Some of them are detox, some are habit cells, and there's various classifications within that 22. But there are several other.
This is also a policy issue, but I'm not a substance abuse specialist, but I do know that what I was told was that, well, the policy is that someone actually detoxing them. That process generally takes years to occur, and I'm not sure how that happens in the jail, but I know that 80% of detox often don't relapse within the first year. That can be a real issue in terms of, recidivism and some of the issues that we're looking at in terms of crime. And then the last thing I wanted to say was that the person participating in this process, in this project, I have been belittled and devalued in terms of my input and stared down more times than worked in any other projects that I've been involved in. And the criminal justice system sends people to a class that I teach called Positive Strategies. And in that class, we examine characteristics of abusive people. And those are characteristics that we look at in terms of trying to look at the foundations of abuse and violence in our society and challenge them. And I want to say that that's not the culture that I work in. And I think that that kind of culture needs to be addressed because it's what we're working against in terms of fighting violence and abuse and crime in our society.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Is it too late to advance an alternative site to the block? I'd like to advance another site besides the block.
No, it's not too late. What we're doing, like I said, we're going to bring the charrette process to conclusion. My last couple of slides are the next steps. There are still things to do, but if something comes to light that needs to be studied, we will do it. So.
You're saying that's postponed until later?
What, you have a suggestion for another location?
Just a quick minute. Shawnee, the lady who's concerned about the drug addicts, suggested affordable school, which is at Wood and Jackson, 2 blocks south of Marquette, 2 blocks off of the expressway, has been unused by students for 50 years because when I was at State Community College in 1961, we were using that gymnasium. And there seems to be a rather substantial grounds about the building, and it's just immediately north of the Smith Ryerson playfield, so there's a big expansion. It's a 2 to 3 story building, and mainly extensive renovations, but it's nice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And one thing I wanted to add real quickly, guys, in regards to the comment about the forum, again, this isn't a defensive comment in any way, shape, or form. We are always looking for suggestions from our public on how we can improve reaching out to the community. I can tell you what we do. We have to use the method by law, which we do obviously prescribe. We put on our website, we have one, which we do. We put in the paper. We're trying Facebook, we've got Twitter. We tried this forum where, again, we went from 8 to 8, 12-hour days. The unfortunate part is this is now my 5th municipality, and it's been a challenge everywhere you go to try to reach out to make sure everyone gets access to their political system. And it is theirs. It doesn't belong to us. It is the public speaker system. Any suggestions that anyone has, we are always open for it. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, well, I think what I might do is go into the recap. And this next session is about, I don't know, since most of you have been through the process, at some point in time, which probably won't take real long, but it might take an hour or so. So I'll ask the crowd, you want to take a break now, or do you want to tear into this? Any preference?
Yes.
Keep going? Okay. All right. What this session is going to do is recap things from the beginning and what all we looked at and the direction the design team recommends and what the next steps are going to be in order to complete the study. As I mentioned, while we're bringing the charrette to conclusion today, we're not bringing the study to conclusion. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. The first day, remember Tuesday, about 3 weeks ago? We started by, outlining the charrette process, and we discussed what this needs assessment would be. And the big thing we did is the roundtable discussions. That first day, there were 83 people in this room. Most of them kind of critical, to be quite honest. But it was a lively, impassioned, genuine exchange. And if you remember, we had flip charts up here and everything, every comment and concern people had, we wrote it down. And you remember the next day it showed up in a PowerPoint presentation. Those roundtable discussions kind of set the tone and made sure that if there were concerns out there that we needed to address, we got them included in the charrette rather than finding out, the last day we need to think about this and think about that. So very valuable. It was a neat forum. And I think it was really awesome. We had a great public turnout, which is unusual. And I will say that by far this is the biggest charrette we've ever done. It was kind of hard. Having a charrette with this many people is kind of difficult. But it was exciting to have all the input. I think everybody had a chance to have their say. Everybody was heard. For the most part, 99% of the exchange was absolutely respectable. And I think it was very, very valuable. We talked about both the jail and roundtable discussions, the juvenile transition center in discussions, and some of the concerns of if we combine or co-locate those facilities, what are additional concerns that we need to be aware of. So again, that went to about 8 o'clock the first evening, and then the design team went back and went to work studying the things that were said that day. Just to prove you're all there, it wasn't a dream, we have photographs. A couple of things of interest of note from the data collection that was done. We spent, like I said, probably about 2 months, maybe a little more, collecting information before the charrette started. But as we mentioned, there was a feasibility study done in 2005. And we went back and validated that study and analyzed the data that was collected during that study and the projections they made in 2007 and the projections they made then. Well, interestingly enough, we all know what happened in 2002, 2008, and 2008 as far as the economy is concerned. It was very interesting to see how the change in statistics dramatically changed from what the previous consultant projected versus what the actual statistics were for the years that they projected. I mean, the curve just went like that. And part of it is that the county population decreased a little bit. However, the county population still, the current projections out there still for the county to increase in population by about 2% over the next 15 to 20 years. Also, the interesting statistic is that overall, the county population went down. Crimes, reported crimes went down. Arrests went down. Court cases went down. Everything went down except the jail population. Well, there's one thing that went up significantly, remember, that was index crimes. The total crime rate went down by 11%, but index crimes, those more violent crimes, murder, rape, robbery, arson, aggravated assault, vehicle theft, and there's 2 more. But those kind of crimes are the ones that have increased by 87%, while the total decreased by 11%. That is why the jail's staying full. That is why it's taking longer to get through the courts. That is why the average length of stay in the jail is going up. So, you know, if you look at these big pictures, you have to look sometimes at these underlying things that create that case. So also the average, capacity of the jail is rated at 370, and you're consistently having 403, 405, 409 people in jail all the time. The average length of stay went up 40% in the last 10 years. And I believe, in looking at the statistics that we've collected, I believe it's largely due to the index crimes, the rate of increase in the index crimes, as opposed to misdemeanors. The sentenced and pre-sentenced population is roughly 50-50, 47-53% in the jail. 30 years ago, jail populations were about 80% pre-trial. But the use of jails has changed. That's another reason why the jail continues to be full. The use of jail, the nature of the jail has changed over the past few decades. And it may likely change again if the DOC decides they're going to dump all your prisoners back into the county. That 53% of 47% of sentenced population is going to go up. It's going to also increase the average length of stay, which further compounds the problem. These are unknown. We don't know what that is. We don't know when that's going to happen, but we probably think it's going to happen to us at some time, so we have to have the capability to be able to deal with it when it does. Also, this chart here in the blue, you'll notice that, as I mentioned, the projections from before. In 2025, the firm that did the study in 2007 projected a need of 788 beds. We're moving forward with a recommendation much smaller than that. Our projection, based on the statistics that we were able to collect, suggests that curve has been bent, largely due to the economy. And due to the economy, there's a lot of things. There's maybe less law enforcement on the street, less resources to deal with things. So that curve gets bent. The world is different, and we have to move forward thinking that, okay, well, maybe things don't return the way they were. We have to deal with this new reality we have. So, moving forward for a planning exercise, we at RQAW Advice originally anticipated moving forward with a bed capacity of about 600. Due to the nature of the feedback we got in the beginning, there was a concern voiced in the public about incarceration rates in Muskegon County and various things. We thought that the capacity of the jail might be or should be less than that. Other alternatives should be incorporated. So again, so far as to make an assumption that we move forward on, we downsized our projection of 600 beds to 528 beds and planned accordingly. That's assuming that alternatives to incarceration are found and effective. If not, that curve is going to continue to go up. So there is a random component here. And again, we'll talk about it a little more in the next steps. One of the things, that got a lot of attention during the charrette was how many beds do we need? One thing that didn't get quite enough time was the fact that regardless of how many beds you need, you've got to have a new jail, because your existing jail is awful. It's a dinosaur from the previous era. It does not support its mission. It does not support the change in the way jails are used. It does not support an efficient operation. It costs a lot of money to operate that a new jail would not cost the county. And for all those reasons, the mechanical, electrical, you got buckets under all the toilets and the laboratories. The plumbing is shot. How do you repair a jail that's overcrowded all the time? Just all the reasons. So I think what came out of it, and I think most people accept the fact, yes, we do need to have a new jail. The question became just how big it was, and that took a lot of the energy out of the room. So for all those reasons, there's no question that jail needs to be replaced as soon as you can afford to do it. On the juvenile transition center, again, we collected the same type of statistical information we did on the jail, but we found that statistical data did not support any kind of projection for two reasons. Just like the jail, the jail is full all the time, so how do you project historical information when it's been overcrowded for 10 years? The juvenile transition center, number one, has a limited population too, so there's not a historical trend. Actually, it's been kind of flat, and actually there's maybe a couple of as far as the average age of the population, a couple lower than it was 10 years ago. But the thing that was primarily different is the whole philosophy is different. So in 2007, when the study was done, it was called the Juvenile Detention Center. Well, the mission is completely different now, so it's a juvenile transition center, which includes detention, treatment, and assessment. Therefore, the philosophy was, okay, this is what we believe the need in the community is. 16 beds of detention, 16 beds of treatment, 4 beds in assessment. We think this is workable. We will give this a try. And in the future, if we need more detention beds, the facility will be designed to add 16 more. If we need more treatment beds, we'll design the facility to add 16 more treatment beds. And we will implement these new programs, monitor their effectiveness, and then if the facility needs to be flexible in its mission, flexible in what it does, we can design a facility that supports whatever that mission might be. Unlike your existing facility doesn't support any of that. There's very little program space. The housing components are not conducive to any kind of interaction. We talked about mission statements and so forth through this process and how the buildings no longer work. Okay. In the roundtable discussions, again, there was a large crowd here that showed up, and sometimes when you do these exercises, it's hard to tell from the group is the voices being concerned, the concerned item, issues being expressed. Are they genuinely the majority, or is it a vocal minority? It's kind of hard to tell. But it was very clear that there was an area of concern in the county regarding the justice system that requires further study. We took these things into account under advisement through the process, but this process is 4 days of somewhat limited, and we've identified a series of things that we'll get to in the next steps that need to be looked at to answer some of the questions that were raised. But the question is, can we institute more diversion from the jail? Pre-trial diversion, post-sentencing diversion, to change the mindset in the community about, well, let's try diversion programs first, then put people in the jail, as opposed to assuming we're putting people in jail first and then trying to divert them later. So that is a whole area that has to be studied. And so some of the things we heard is, like the appearance tickets are one way that's been used for several years to, cite people and we'll bring them into jail to manage that population. But the fact is, you have been managing the jail population for quite some time. Talking about how failure to appears are handled, the fact that perhaps instituting a tethering system in the county would be a cost-effective solution. We talked about several courts, sobriety court, mental health court, veterans court, drug court. A number of these kind of programs can be either instituted or more effectively used to move people out of the jail. Setting how bonds are set and how they are, how they're set and what they're set at is something that should be reviewed. An area of concern is the increasing average length of stay. As I mentioned, it's gone up to 40% over the last 10 years. That's just something that needs to be addressed because, as we discussed before, the longer people are staying in jail, the higher that average daily population is going to be. Can we do something about that, or can we not? In this form, we're not able to answer that question. That's a bigger discussion. That's a question to be concerned with. Then as far as jail trends, this, the ever-present state looking at moving the DOC prisoners back into the jail and making those prisoners our problem, that's going to have a huge impact on the county and the jail. How do we deal with that? And inevitably, I think it's going to happen, just a matter of when. And will the state help pay for it? And if they do, for how long before that goes away? So, it's a reality. It's coming down the pipe. So the question is, what do we do about it now?
It's not just our state.
That's right. That's right. It's happening everywhere. So you can see it in other states it's happened. So you can bet it's going to happen here. So now is the time to think about how are we going to deal with it. And then the Prison Rape Elimination Act will have an impact on the jail as well. The bed allocation release, one of the things we're going to do is try to get more specific statistics on that release program, how it's been instituted over the past several years, to try to determine. It's hard to tell at this point in time how many people we're diverting out of the jail now. We know what the jail population is. What we don't know is exactly how many people aren't there because of what we're already doing.
This is an issue where the attorneys in the community, whether the public defenders or regular defense attorneys, and the judges really need to decide how to handle this process. This is not a process that law enforcement can handle or the sheriff can handle because they don't have jurisdiction over that. But this is an issue. I talked to Matt yesterday about this is an issue where some of that stuff can really be discussed, but it's got to have those players at the table to do it.
Absolutely. Sure. Okay, move on. On the Juvenile Transition Center, some of the comments.
I stepped up for a minute. I don't know whether this was on a slide that I missed, but the one thing that was discussed, and I don't think we should lose sight of it there in the jail, is that population of 180 inmates that, according to that day, were obstruction of justice complaints. And just what is that?
That's in my last slide.
Okay, all right.
Next steps. Those are things. That's one of the things on the list. That's going to be continuing.
Because I didn't know whether that was a trend, something that's increasing or is decreasing or whatever. Thank you.
On the Juvenile Transition Center, we talked about there's going to be more focus on treatment and not so much on detention. You're always going to need detention, but is there an opportunity to be more effective through treatment? One of the problems with the existing facility is the fact that it's so far away from downtown, it's so far away from where most of the kids are, so far away from many of the services that community mental health and so forth that are delivered to the facility. If we had it closer to town, we would do a better job for these kids, provide more services. So the location and so forth of the new facility is very important. With the 16 detention beds that we're providing, we're actually decreasing the number of detention beds, although the overall facility is larger, almost twice the size. If you take into account detention treatment and assessment, there's 36 beds as opposed to 22 that you have now. Also, the issue of the location and of the neighborhood that the facility is in will have an impact on things like walk-offs, potential drug trafficking in the facility or community, and those are things that we take into consideration too as well. We talked, just like we talked about the jail, there was some juvenile diversion programs, and we also talked about the ability that this facility will eliminate a lot of the out-of-state or out-of-county placements. Hopefully we can decrease that to a certain amount. We don't know what that is yet because those programs are not in place yet. The idea is to put them in place, see how, what effect they can have, and reduce those out-of-state to some extent with the resources that are available within the county. you have a lot of resources here, a lot of people really care. So if we had a place to do this, we'd be more effective. And then we'll find out what impact that has on out-of-state placements. We've created an intake assessment center on this facility, which is something we don't have now. Again, we're just creating a facility to support some of the programs that the facility wants to do that currently can't due to the physical point. Then we talk again from a combined facility. What are additional concerns of both the jail and juvenile transition center if they're combined or co-located on a site? And basically they involve identity. That so this is one of the changes. The number is what? 48.4. This first comment, it was stated earlier that 48.2% of the juvenile transition center kids end up in jail. The statistic is actually 48.4, and it's kids that are involved in the family court, not in detention. So that's a very different statistic. Because this is a slightly different number of a much larger demographic than just the facility itself.
And the comment was those who were actually in the facility, their recidivism is way higher than that 48. You don't have those numbers, but the impression is over 75% of the standard.
So we'll make that modification before we go to the meeting. The advantage. She's going to email us the proper thing. So
they didn't hear our little sidebar.
The comment was that the study that was done, the statistic is done, represents the urban portion of the county, primarily Muskegon and Muskegon Heights. That's not a county-wide statistic. So we'll figure out how to when to send that to us. As far as advantages of combining the facilities, it's largely, we accounted for roughly 3,000 to 4,000 square feet of the total package could be eliminated or reduced by combining them, which is, 3,000 or 4,000 square feet, it's money. It's not a significant amount. However, on the other hand, it was important in the Juvenile Transition Center to have an identity separate from the jail. We don't want the stigma associated with the jail, especially when the mission of the facility has been changed from purely detention to a combination of detention and treatment. And that from a financial standpoint, the facility needs to comply with a certain number of standards and licensing requirements and things like that to qualify for the funding that's going to make the program possible. Okay? Okay, so that was day one. Yes. I asked before we started. In the beginning of Wednesday, in session 2, we started talking about, we recapped all of the things we heard on Tuesday, and then we went into architectural programming. We defined what a program was and defined how big the program was in this particular case. Essentially, what we came up with is an architectural program for the jail of approximately 155,000 square feet, which, as you can see, is significantly less by about 50,000 square feet than the previous study that was done. Most of that is the capacity recommendation is lower than what was done before. On the Juvenile Transition Center, we have an architectural program about 39 just under 40,000 square feet compared to 50,000 square feet from the previous study. And again, the biggest reason is they projected 32 detention beds in their previous recommendation. We're only planning for 16. And then again, combining the facility, we can save 3,000 or 4,000 square feet. So we went through that in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we talked about the basics of design, and we developed what we call the ideal plan. If the world were real, and we had all the money that we wanted, and things were ideal, what would this thing look like? How big would the red box be? So we started that with both a jail and the juvenile transition center. So, as you remember, we laid out all these blocks on the table. We laid out these relationships. You know, where would intake be? Where would housing be? Where would medical be located in relationship to these other functions? And we laid out the blocks and came up with this configuration as an ideal configuration for the jail. And we did the same thing for the juvenile transition center. And the unique thing about the transition center, that golden block in the middle is, you know, the recreation areas. And, you know, this whole center core are shared services: recreation, visitation, court, hearing rooms, and things like that. They're shared between the detention program and the treatment program. Then we developed an ideal configuration for if the two are combined into one facility, what would that look like, and what would be close to what, and what would be separate from what. Then we developed a drawing, a blocking and stacking diagram from those blocks that we pushed and pulled around. This is the juvenile transition center. Then in the afternoon, we went, okay, now that we have our ideal site, or ideal building, let's go find a place to put it. And we ended up looking at 3 various sites. One is the business park up in the north part of the county. The second one is out east on Apple Avenue, about 8 miles east of downtown. And then a site in town at 414 West Broadway. Those are the sites that, there were 11 sites at the beginning we looked at. We narrowed it down. These are the 3 that seemed to be viable. So on in the business park up north, we looked at 4 different options. We looked at, let's do a jail only. Let's look at a juvenile transition center only. We looked at a co-located facility, which co-located in this exercise was 2 separate buildings were next to each other. And the combined facility were 2 facilities under 1 roof. So the difference between co-locate and combined might be as little as 30 or 40 feet. It might be as much as 2 miles. But it's still the intent to share services between the 2 facilities. In this particular case, on option 4, the combined facility, did not make any sense at this site because the way the site was configured, there was a road going right down the middle between the 2 facilities with all the utilities and all that. It would just be cost prohibitive to relocate all that brand new stuff. So the combined facility, this option, wasn't really considered. Then on Apple Avenue, there was a site advertised as 13 acres. Once we got into to analyze the site, we found out about half the site was a detention pond. So originally we thought we were going to put a jail and juvenile transition center on it. Ended up being there was only enough available land to build a juvenile transition center. So option 1, 3, and 4 were not even considered. So that was a juvenile transition center site only. The vacant site at 414 West Broadway, and it was the former what? Something Lift Tech facility. 20 acres, great site in my opinion. It had a lot of flexibility. We actually studied 8 different options for that particular site because there were so many different unique aspects about the site. So we looked at 2 different aspects for just the jail, 2 for the juvenile transition center, 3 having co-located 2 separate buildings on the same site, and then 1 combined. So there was a lot of opportunities to do different things here. And the 414 West Broadway site is one of our, we'll call it our short list, our finest. one of the sites that's made the hit parade for further consideration, and we're going to make recommendations to the committee. This particular scenario, option 3C, which is the co-located facility. This road here is Broadway. This is Sherman. This is Temple here. We're going to put the jail down on the southern part of the site facing east, and the juvenile transition center on the north part of the site facing north. So the benefit is this has a Temple Street address, this has a Sherman Street address. There's plenty of space in between these two facilities that we can landscape, provide spaces for gardens, additional future expansion, all kinds of things. I mean, that worked out. I mean, that's a really cool option, we think. Pretty exciting. And then because this was one of the preferred options, we've developed some three-dimensional graphics. Because there were 20 different options we studied, different levels of drawing and development were done for different sites, because we didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on a site that wasn't work very well. But we spend a little more time developing graphics and so forth on the sites that are going to receive further consideration. Now the advantages, are several of this site. It's on a bus route, it's close to services, it's easy access to the highway. The property acquisition cost is very reasonable. What we don't know is, are there environmental issues we need to clean up there that will have an impact on that land cost. It's just a great opportunity there. Some of the disadvantages are that it would be to potentially take off the tax rolls for industrial use, something of that nature. We still need to verify the status of the railroad up on the corner of the site where the juvenile transition center is going to be. And the juvenile transition center staff was concerned about putting not just this site, but any urban site with potential for kids to walk off on the treatment center. Because the treatment center is a staff secure facility. They're not locked in. So they expressed a concern that the more urban the environment, the more likely there are going to be walk-offs, people walking off and they go to find them again. So that was but generally this is a very good site with a lot of opportunity. Then in the next morning, we came back and we looked at, we went through our vacant sites, and the only vacant site we're recommending is the Broadway site. Let's look at some existing buildings. Basically, in the morning, we did the jail with the existing jail in Layton Avenue, which is the Roundy's building. So at the existing jail site, again, we looked at doing just the jail, as far as expanding it, putting a juvenile transition center on the site across the street where all the parking is. Don't know where you put your other, put your displaced parking, but great spot for the juvenile transition center. And then co-locating these two facilities, and then doing a combined facility at that location just doesn't work. Too many street closures, too many high-dollar sites to buy to make it work. On Layton Avenue, we looked at it as a jail, as a juvenile transition center only, and then a co-located and a combined, so this site had all those options. As far as the jail is concerned, it worked out pretty well. Again, one of the three sites on our hit parade will be the Roundy's building as a co-located facility. There's a parcel of property adjacent to this site that has the communications tower. We're suggesting trying to obtain that site or use part of that site, and then house the jail inside the existing Roundy's building, which would allow a lot of expansion. There's probably 300 beds or so of expansion capability within the building. So we're going to have about 66,000 square feet left over inside the building for whatever future development we might want. And there's also space on the site for additional future expansion outside the building. As far as the juvenile transition center, it would be a new ideal plant located adjacent to that site. This white area identified as unfinished. This is the area that would be available for future expansion. The neat thing, one of the things we talked about in existing buildings, one of the benefits of an existing building is you get like there's, when you buy houses with bonus room, you get a lot of bonus rooms in an existing building like this, because even though you might not need all the space now, the space is there available for the future, and the build out of that space would be much more cost effective to build out the space that's already shelled in than to build a new site with footings and foundations, paving and all that kind of stuff. So that's one of the advantages of an existing building. So these are some three-dimensional images of the site. Again, this is the existing building here. And again, on this option, we're tearing down, we're recommending tearing down 33,000 square feet of the insulated refrigerated storage in the back to create space for the service yard, where the vehicular sally port will come in, where the loading dock will be. We can create a secure service yard back there that's be fenced in for those kind of deliveries. And then placing the juvenile transition center on the site where the tower is. The tower is probably right here at that location. If we can move the tower. One suggestion was moving the tower to the jail site, because that's where the EOC, Emergency Operating Center, will be located in and around these buildings. So that's one possible location for the relocation of that tower. Another view. We put the tower in the park in that last one, right? Yeah. Moved over the park. It didn't cost us anything to do that.
Just a click of a button.
It was easy. Steven's a miracle worker. So option 3C at the Roundy's building is, again, the advantage is they're separate facilities. They can have separate identities, although they will have basically the street addresses will be very same street. The neighborhood was a good neighborhood from the fact that it's a mixed-use neighborhood. There's residential, there's commercial, there's industrial. It's right on the highway. It's on the edge of a neighborhood, not in the middle of a neighborhood. So it seemed to be a good location there. The fact that we got a lot of expansion capabilities within the walls of the existing building is good. And is a little bit better neighborhood environment from the transition center. About the likelihood of walk-ups would probably be not as high here. The disadvantage is there's going to be costs associated with relocating a 300-foot tower. And we are also going to have to try to acquire that land the tower is on, which, the tower is owned by the Communications Commission. The land the tower sits on belongs to the city of Muskegon, and the land around the tower is owned by the township, so that might be kind of tricky. Maybe we need a charrette to negotiate that thing. So in the afternoon, we came back and looked at two more existing buildings. One of them is the old hospital on Oak Avenue, and the McLaughlin School on that address is wrong. It's on Catherine Street. So we looked at those two buildings in the afternoon. So again, from the hospital site, we looked at it for a jail. We did not look at it for a juvenile transition center only, because it doesn't make any sense to buy a 200,000 square foot building, put a 40,000 square foot facility. It makes sense. But we did study it as a combined facility because the square footage was there. We're right over. Yeah, right. Okay, on the Oak Avenue Hospital, the option 4B, picky measurements, 1, 2, and 3, and then there's A, B, C. That's how we got it. The intent of the facility plan is that we're going to reuse, this is kind of the dividing line more or less between the jail functions and the juvenile transition center functions. We're going to reuse this facility. We're going to add gymnasium spaces. There's no real tall spaces anywhere in this hospital. So even though we got a huge building of 200,000 square feet, we're going to add some gymnasium space for the juvenile side. We're going to add cell blocks and recreation areas for the jail will be on the outside of the existing building. Everything else is inside the building. So we'll incorporate all the housing units in this option within the hospital grounds. This is the 4-story tower in the middle separating the jail from juvenile. That will be 2 floors of that will be the sheriff's office. 2 floors will be vacant space for future expansion. The existing kitchen will be renovated for use between the juvenile and the adult facilities. The existing OBGYN facility will be converted to intake. The 2 housing pods will be built outside, and we've demonstrated that we could expand this site even further for additional housing pods in the future. So that's the 3rd site on our hit parade at the hospital. These are just graphics showing how we can utilize it. One of the things about the hospital, the large part of the basement will be unused, so there's lots of opportunities for storage and other needs. I mean, because of the square. One of the nice things about the hospital too is it gives you some additional flexibility that the Roundy's building doesn't need. From the aspect is the hospital's all built out. It's got offices and ceilings and toilets, and half the rooms in that hospital have a toilet room in it. So there's plumbing everywhere, mechanical rooms everywhere. And there's an opportunity, if budget becomes a concern, to maybe move into a facility, move into a part of the building with minimal renovation. And maybe we go to the sheriff and say, okay, here's the 2nd floor of the tower. Can you use that office right there? We just change the carpet and paint it. There's opportunities like that, as opposed to gutting a space and rebuilding it, which need a lot of investigation still. So we're pretty excited about that hospital. So I think I kind of went through. The one disadvantage, or one of the disadvantages of that area was traffic. It expressed, access getting out onto Apple is kind of precarious, and getting out on the highway. That was expressed. And then having the colleges up the road a little bit, all that kind of traffic.